So welcome to our first edition for the CEO series. Our subject today, our guest speaker today, is one of the leading coaches in the UAE. He is a board member of the International Coaching Federation. That gives him a lot of gravitas. Lots of people consider themselves as coaches today, but certified coaches is a different category of someone just putting the words coach after their name. And that's why we wanted to start this series with Dennis Kight, who's, as I said, board member in the National Coaching Federation. So the topic that we're going to be discussing today is coaching, the new must-have skill in crisis management. We hear of leaders will say, I'm a great coach. But if we sat in on that interaction, we would find that it leaves a lot to be desired. And they waver from coaching to managing and directing to mentoring. What specifically about coaching is different. And this is why it was important for us as we think through crisis management and what we're going through today. The skills of coaching is going to be the new must-have as it relates to that. So with the coronavirus disrupting the global landscape, it is now quite evident that one of the most important new skills leaders will have to either upskill or enhance is the ability to coach, which is what I just said. Working remotely and managing virtual teams is going to require a coaching mindset. And as a formal introduction, our guest today for the CES series is Mr. Dennis Kight, who's one of the top executive coaches. And I say the top executive coaches. He is the coach in the UAE. He sits on the board of the International Coaching Federation, and that doesn't come by lightly. So to start us off, I've heard this from managers from time to time, specifically in stressful environments of coaching and stressful times. I don't have time to coach. I don't have the skills to coach. We've heard that from time to time. What would be your response to a leader who's using that as a crutch? And I say it's a crutch that would give you those statements being, I don't have time and I don't have the skills.
Okay, great question. And thank you very much, Ron, for having me here today. And thank you for that very nice introduction as well. I don't have the time to coach or I don't have the skills to coach. I think you hear that a lot from people. And what I would say to leaders is that coaching is a critical skill that leaders have to have. It's not a matter of wanting to have it or maybe it would be nice to have. It's now a must have in your leadership portfolio. It's just as important as executive presence, good presentation skills, developing strategy, any of those things. Coaching falls right within there as well. If you want to be a great leader, you have to have coaching in the portfolio. So it's something that's learned and it's developed through practice. It's not an easy skill that you just wake up one morning and decide that you're a coach. But it is something that you can learn. And I try to look at it the way that you develop a muscle when you go to the gym for the first time. And you lift these weights and 2 days later, your muscles hurt. Or the first day they hurt, the second day they really hurt. And you think, do I want to go back and do this again? And you're like, oh, yes, I'm going to push through because this is what I want to do. And you continue going back and it gets easier and easier. And it's like that with coaching. It might be painful at first when you do it. It was certainly painful for me when I first did it. But the more I practiced it, the more comfortable I became. I see it as a really worthwhile skill, especially now in the current environment that we're in. Okay.
You know, one of the things you mentioned there was a critical skill to have. So if I'm working inside of an organization and maybe what I think in terms of learning and development department to bring a person like you in, or how would I proceed to build up those coaching skills or those muscles as the metaphor you used?
Well, one of the things that I would want to do is I would want to understand how you're building that into the strategy of your business. Okay. It is a trendy thing for people to say we want to have a coaching culture within our organization. Yeah. But I would push back and ask the reason, or ask for the question why, or how do you see this as furthering your your business strategy by adding coaching into the culture. You do want to build it into the culture, but you want to make sure that it's there for a purpose, that it's intentional. And so I would start with that as the stepping stone for bringing coaches in. From then, I would then start to look at what are some of the needs that I have, or what are some of the needs that my team has that a coach would be good for. And then I would go to the International Coach Federation website. There's a coach finder tool on there. You can go in there and you can type in exactly what the geography that you're looking for, the type of coaching you're looking for, and it will pull up a list of certified coaches for you that you can then approach.
Okay. Are your clients based on coming into an organization and so if a company says we want to build a coaching culture, is that part of your purvey, is to go in and set that up, or how would that be approached if an organization is interested in bringing coaching inside of the entire organization and creating that kind of a culture?
So if a client were to approach me, like I said, I would want to go in and engage in a conversation about what it is that they want to accomplish through coaching, and see if there's some coaching elements already within their culture that we could then leverage upon as well. Do a quick assessment, understand what the desired end result is, see where we're starting with, and then I would come back with a couple of suggestions of maybe directions that we could go in, or areas that we could focus in that could help them to establish coaching as part of their culture.
Okay. Yeah, in a previous statement, I'd mentioned manager, I mentioned coaching, I mentioned mentoring. And leaders will tell you that I'm a great coach. And what they're doing is managing. How can a leader determine, or better still, what is the difference between managing someone and coaching someone, so that we can get that clear right up front? Because lots of times it gets blurred and people think they're doing one thing and they're doing something on the other side.
No, that is a great question. And if I were to put that in very simple terms, I would say managing is telling someone what to do, where coaching is engaging in a conversation where you're exploring new ideas, and you're kind of experimenting and testing to see if those ideas would work, and there's no judgment within that environment that you've created. I would say that's the big difference between managing and coaching.
Okay. When you're called in and you're working with leaders, do they understand that concept, or that's the transition they're making from understanding the difference between the two? Or
it depends. Some of them have been exposed to coaching before. Some people think that coaching is like therapy, which it's not. And so I explain the difference between them. So it really depends on the individual client.
Okay.
And I approach each person individually. I have frameworks that I use for coaching, but I don't rigorously apply those that you have to do this for this person at this particular time, because everyone is different. And so I would look at each individual and I would see how far are they along in their coaching journey. Are they just beginning? Then we would maybe start at one point and have a conversation about really what coaching is, the power behind it, how you could leverage it, and how you could share it with your team. Maybe another client who has had coaching for a few years or so, we could build on something else that looks at something more specific. For example, if they wanted to learn how to have more presence when they're speaking publicly, for example, we could coach them on how to do that. So it all depends on where the client is at that particular time.
In the coaching process, it's built on the framework that we ask people questions. We're not giving them directions, we're asking questions. But the other dynamic or connecting point to that, which is going to make it powerful, is to be able to listen to what they say. Because so many times people will listen for a pause, and when that pause comes in, right away we jump in to give our insights on that. Yeah. And I know in my coaching journey, I've struggled with that because I want to just give you kind of a solution to it. And the more I did it, I realized the pause is powerful, and I may stretch it out, and that way it gives you more time to think about it, but I'm listening as opposed to injecting myself right into it as soon as I come up with it. So
Yeah.
give us your insights as to the importance of listening during the coaching process.
Okay. So most people, when they listen, or they're taught that when they're listening to another person, that you're already thinking in your mind what the answer is going to be, and you're formulating it, so that as soon as they're finished, you could immediately say your answer.
Mm-hmm.
What you end up doing is you stop listening to the person because you're listening to your brain think instead. And that's the absolute opposite of what coaches do. So one of the core competencies of coaching is active listening. And I spent a lot of time in my certification program learning it and practicing it. Active listening is really listening with intent. You're fully engaged with your client. You're listening to what they're saying, and sometimes what the client isn't saying. You're listening to how they're saying things. And then you engage in a conversation with them about that. I think that the power of silence, or the power of the pause, comes into play when you use it in a way where it allows your clients to reflect and to think about their answers before they actually give them, or maybe think a little more deeply about some of the additional possibilities that might be out there. That's when I typically use it.
Okay. You said a very powerful, I'm going to say phrase that you mentioned, what they didn't say. You asked a question, they respond to you, but maybe you feel that they're not addressing it. How do you, in other words, they didn't really answer it, and how do you kind of
How do you get them to answer it, or how do you get them to approach that?
Yeah.
I would ask a question along the lines of, I noticed that you did this when we were talking about that. Or that there was a pause there. What were you thinking at that time? What were you thinking about? Let's talk about that, or let's dig into that a little bit deeper. Just to get them to feel comfortable with, it's okay. Maybe they are feeling a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But in this space that we're talking, and there's no judgment here, so let's just get it out on the table. Let's talk about it, and let's address it. So I would try to use probing questions to ask them. If a client then pushes back and says, no, I don't want to talk about that, I'm not going to push it further. I want them to be open to it. You have to be open to coaching in order to be coached. And I always make sure that my clients are open to that coaching during the conversation. And even when I'm engaging new clients, I want to make sure that they're open to coaching before I take them on as clients.
Okay. So they didn't answer. In other words, don't go there. Would you in another session, would you come back and address that and make a mental note of?
I may. It depends. If it's something that I see that's really getting in the way of them accomplishing their goals, and if I can see that if they can overcome that, then they're going to be able to achieve what they want to achieve, I may push them a little bit more and push them into that area where they feel a little bit of discomfort, to maybe approach and address that feeling. But I play it by ear, partially as I'm listening to the client to see if they are open to going further, or if they're not. And you could tell pretty easily if a person is talking quite a bit and then suddenly they shut down. And you could point out, I noticed that you shut down when we were talking about this particular topic. Do you want to go into that a little bit further? So that brings me to another point, and when we talk about mindfulness and being in the moment, so that would kind of be a being in the moment. Yes. Definitely. And that's one of the things that I found with coaching is when you are in the moment with your client, you're actively engaged with them, it's exhausting. And so I love coaching, but I couldn't do it 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I don't have the mental capability to do that. I don't know of any coach that has that, because you get so involved with your client we are so engaged with your client when you're talking with them that it takes a lot of your energy to do so.
Well, there's been a lot of redirection or transformation in organizations as it relates to performance management. And the companies that redesigned their performance management process, they built that coaching in order to weave that coaching into a natural conversation. Mm-hmm. So our performance discussion or weekly meetings could also be a coaching discussion. How could we weave in a normal conversation some coaching aspects into that?
I think one of the great questions, and you actually used it, a great coaching question starts with how. How do you plan to accomplish this? How was your previous experience with the same approach? Those types of things. So I think when you are asking questions that are open-ended, that allow an interaction to come, that's going back and forth, it's much easier to have a coaching conversation with people. You could use it not only at work, but you could use it in your personal interactions as well. And if I could share a personal experience with you,
sure.
My parents are both well into their 80s. And so sometimes talking on the phone with them is not the easiest thing to do. I'll have a conversation, or I used to have conversations with my dad, and I would say, "How you doing?" And he'd say, "Fine." And then I'd say, "Okay, what are your plans for the day?" "Nothing." And it was like pulling teeth to try to have a conversation with him. And after I finished my certification in coaching, I thought, you know what, I'm going to try some of these questions on my parents and see how they work.
Okay.
And so the next time that my dad said fine, I asked him, so what makes that fine? What has made your day fine?
Okay.
And he started having more conversations with me. And it was a little painful at first. We practiced a little bit more. I have conversations with him now every week where we can go on for 35, 45 minutes.
Wow.
So it's something that you could use at work. It's something that you could use personally as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you had that one answer response and you turned that into a conversation.
Exactly.
By giving me so I said, give me a descriptive of fine. What does fine mean?
Yeah. What does fine mean, or what made this fine, or what does fine mean to you?
Okay.
Something along those lines. That opens up the conversation. And it's talking about things that are in the present, and maybe even things that are in the future, not necessarily what's happened in the past. It's a great way of keeping your conversation moving forward.
Okay, cool. The other key point, and you think in terms of virus related, and how everyone's working from home now, and maybe my team, I don't have that interaction where I can pick up those signals from them, and I'm depending on voice as a kind of a communication mechanism. How can we differentiate, well, not differentiate, but if we're coaching a team versus coaching a client. So we've discussed coaching a client. Let's move it over to the other side. How do you coach a team in today's environment? That weekly meeting that you have, how can you turn that in kind of a coaching that people feel that they can give something beyond the one person answer, response kind of thing? Sorry about that.
That's all right. So how do you do that? Well,
some guidelines, a framework that we can think through from virtual team coaching versus in front of you coaching.
Okay, so for me personally, the way that I built my business model, I coach people face to face, and I also coach them virtually. So I have clients based around the world. It's not feasible for them to fly me. Well, I couldn't even fly there if I wanted to right now, but it's not feasible for them to fly me to them every time we have a session. And so we set up virtual sessions as well. What I try to do is I try to, in my mind, think that this person is physically sitting in front of me, so that I can have that type of interaction with them. So what I would give as a recommendation to leaders who are coaching virtual teams is don't use your phone as the method for meeting with people. Zoom is free. WebEx is offering free things. GoToMeetings is there. There's lots of virtual platforms out there that you can use that are easy to use as well, where you can get together with your team and actually physically, or you could at least visually see each other. That makes it easier for you to see what's being said and what's not being said, or how things are being said.
Or what's not being said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think what it does as well is it gives you the opportunity to set the type of environment that you want this meeting to be. And so I have made recommendations to my clients that are struggling with leading teams from a virtual perspective is to get together every morning for like 10, 15 minutes. And it's just as a check-in with everyone. Let's see how everyone is doing. We're not going to talk about work or anything. Let's just talk about whatever we need to talk about right now, or the things that are concerning us. Maybe we talk a little bit about some of the deliverables that we have for today, and some of the challenges that people might be facing. We talk about some of the solutions that we might be able to come up with as a team, and then share some of the successes as well. You do that in the first 15, 20 minutes of the day, you've set the stage for how that day is going to be for your team for the rest of the day. And it creates that environment for them as well, where they feel comfortable, where they can have conversations, and it's not something that they're going to be judged on, or this is going to be held against me when I'm having my performance review,
Right.
or things like that.
Okay, in other words, you build that relationship.
Yeah. You have to use it using the tools that we have. Right now, we can't see face to face. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think that we're going to be going back to the world where everyone is getting together face to face in big groups anymore. Yeah. So the sooner
unless you're in the US.
Yeah. That's a whole
we'll
other
skip
story.
over that, yeah.
But I think this is an opportunity for us to really experiment and play with the different virtual tools that are available, and become much more comfortable using them as well.
Okay, cool. For leaders who would, I say, if you think in terms of your coaching toolkit, what do you have inside of that toolkit? But what I was talking about when I mentioned let me go back to relationship for a minute. The challenges of performance management and going into coaching. One of the things that I've always felt was a disconnect. If I have not built a relationship with you, and I'm coming to you now from a coaching perspective, how is everything? Fine. I can go beyond that, but in order to make that sink, maybe the step back is to build a relationship first. So my father's favorite saying was, you dig a well before you need the water.
Yes.
So the companies that made that transition to try to create that coaching culture, they realized that the manager part of the transformation to going to coaching, they depended so much on managing and directing, they didn't have the relationship there. So if you can talk to us a little about that, because that's a transition from manager to coach, that's built on relationship.
Right. Well, and I think that there's a big disconnect between performance reviews, which are backward thinking and backward view, and a coaching conversation, which is present and future view.
Yeah.
And so companies did see that. And I know that within the high-tech industry, they were kind of some of the first to really push and change away from looking at a backwards viewed performance review and how do we turn this into a coaching conversation that is looking at the future rather than at the past. And part of that is, just like you said, you need to establish a relationship. So the ways that I would recommend, or that I would coach my clients on establishing a relationship would be, and this works both ways. I need to understand how to manage my manager as the same way that my manager needs to understand how to manage me.
Okay.
And if you can have a conversation where you're talking about what your needs are, and what your manager's needs are, and how we can address both of those needs, you're starting to develop that relationship there.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to be about you have this deliverable that needs to be done, so how am I going to help you to get to that deliverable? That kind of comes later on. It's more of we're working together as a team, so how do we work together as a team? And I think that this is where team coaching really comes into play as well, because the focus of team coaching is really how do you leverage the team to be much more effective as a team than they would be as individuals.
Okay. Okay, cool.
And a lot of that comes from just understanding each other, being open to learning about each other, being non-judgmental, establishing a guideline as casual as you want it to be of how to behave and how to act in certain situations when things are going really well. And then maybe when things are challenging, how do we all agree as a team that we're going to be addressing those types of things as well. And when you have that sort of agreement and everyone agrees to it and they understand it and you apply it, when someone does something that's out of line of what everyone agreed, it's very easily to say, we all agreed that we would do this instead. So how do we get back to that place again? And people aren't offended by it, and they don't feel like they've been personally attacked or things like that. So it all comes back to communication.
Okay.
You establish a strong communication with your team and with your each team member individually. You're going to have a great foundation that you could build coaching upon that.
Okay. And you and I have known each other for years. In a prior life, you were a senior executive for IBM in the leadership development, and that was part of your portfolio. What are some findings from a leadership development perspective? You were developing leaders, and the role today of leaders as a gap or deficits from the corporate sector, past state, to future state. And if we think of leaders today, we all, as a leader, we bring something to the table. But if you had to give kind of a development tool that a leader should look to move into the next stage of their development, because you play it on both sides, what would you think that would be?
A leadership tool that someone that could apply to themselves in order to take that next step?
Yeah.
I would say, I do have a framework that specifically focuses around that. I do use with clients, and what we do is we look at where they add value, where are they known, and who are they known by for having this particular value in the organization. What value do they bring to the table? What's their individual career vision? Is it aligned with what the company has for them? Because a lot of times there's a big disconnect there where the company says, yeah, we want to develop this individual to do this. And when you talk with the individual, they're like, no, I don't want to do that. So is your vision aligned with what the company's vision is aligned? If it's not, how do you make sure that you can get it aligned, or how do you make sure that you can get the company to align towards your vision instead? And so we look at it from those types of perspectives. I would look at also core values. What are the core values that you should rely on to guide you in decision making when you're making a career decision?
Yeah, so that foundation.
Yeah.
So back to toolkits. I was starting into that and got distracted when I thought of the other follow-up to that. Someone is new, starting out, a new manager, right out of school, first development opportunity, first leadership opportunity. Can you give us some examples of questions that a aspiring leader can look to, powerful questions that they could always keep in their toolkit to kind of begin the process of getting to know their people, trying to develop themselves into more of a coach, as more of a manager? So coaching questions, if you could give us some examples of, and this is mainly geared towards the new leader first level leadership, second level leadership, because at a certain point in time, the longer you've been around, you pretty much have your toolkit and you know what to use. Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. If we had it all, we wouldn't need people like you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're talking on this question is geared towards the new people that are listening, that is maybe their first level of leadership. And if you became a leader within the last year or so, and all of a sudden this comes through, crisis management, all those things, they are lost.
Yeah. So the first thing that I would do before I gave them questions is I would tell them it's okay to not know everything. Okay. You don't have to be perfect. None of us are perfect. None of us know everything. It's okay to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. It's okay to try things and maybe fail, and let's learn from those. And if you start with that sort of foundation as well, you kind of remove your own ego and you realize I've got a great team here who know a lot more than I do about certain things. I want to leverage them. You don't have to be the manager who knows everything and dictates downwards. So bringing people up to your level, asking them questions like, how can I help you succeed? I think is a great coaching question from the manager. A question along the lines of, how will X help us to attain our business strategy or further our business strategy? Is another one to use. Who's someone within your network that you can reach out to for advice on this particular challenge? Questions like that, I would say keep those, because all of those types of questions not only drive the conversation further, but they also establish a relationship of trust between you and you as the manager and your team as well.
Mm-hmm. You know, there was a very famous case study, Project Oxygen. This was about a 10-year-old case study, but it was the first to kind of look at capabilities of a manager. And their environment was all engineers, and some had hard skills, some had soft skills. The great managers that they found out was the managers that had soft skills, were ability to build relationships, who were using coaching techniques and did not know they were using coaching techniques. And that's what kind of started the process. This was 2008, I think it was, that they did this case study, and they upgraded it in 2018, went back and ran the same piece of research, and it basically came out to the other. So there was a few things that were added, was teams and managing teams and a couple of the other things, but it basically stayed the same. So when we think of developing managers, developing leaders, what is your thoughts on soft skills? Because we may have promoted people based on the technical aspects. So you were a great accountant, you become the accounting manager. You were a great engineer, you're the engineering manager. But internally, as you said, I don't want to do that, but in order for me to grow here, I have to do that.
Right. Yeah, soft skills are hugely important. And they are, up until now, have been skills that have been kind of thought about secondhand.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you're a great salesperson, I'm going to promote you. That means that you're going to be a great sales manager, and you could be the worst sales manager in the world, but you're a great seller. And it's okay to be a great seller and not be a great manager, but don't be a manager then. And so really helping organizations to understand that the soft skills are just as important as the hard skills. They are skills that everyone can learn. I wouldn't say everyone will become perfect at it, but you can definitely learn and exercise and grow those skills, polish them and get better at them. But I would definitely recommend that companies include within their decision-making criteria when they're looking at promoting someone, is that they're looking at the soft skills capabilities just as much as the hard.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because that was the result of the finding. So in their promotion criteria, they looked at soft skills because they realized that the skills to be the salesperson who closes all the deals is different than managing another team of 7 or 8 people and getting them excited, engaged to close deals as a result of that.
Right.
So, cool.
Because you exponentially increased your selling capabilities by turning into someone with soft skills or coaching.
Yes.
Your team becomes that then.
Exactly. So thank you so much for being our first guest on the CEO series. And I hope that everyone got some insights on this, because coaching is the new must-have. And start trying to think in terms of developing yourselves as a coach. Dennis is available. We're going to put his contact information up on the screen at the end of this presentation, a Q&A, so that if you need to get in touch with him, if you have some questions or whatever it is, you can always follow up with him. So Dennis, thank you so much, and I will see you once we're no longer under lockdown.
Exactly. Thank you, Ron. And if we don't see each other in Dubai, we should see each other on an airplane going somewhere.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me today.
Okay, cool.